Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. Got a really great guest on today. She's a Lakota graphic designer and advocate from the Spirit Lake Nation of Fort Totten, North Dakota. She earned her BFA in New Media Arts and Interactive Design at the Institute of American Indian Arts, and she received her Master's of Graphic Design from North Carolina State University. Please join me in welcoming Sadie Red Wing. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you for the invite, and thank you to everybody listening on the podcast today.
Ready for 20 questions?
Let's go for it.
Okay, question one. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
Yeah, so I'm currently a professor. So I am in a unique position. So as a professor at OCADU in Toronto, Canada, I came in through a cluster hire. So I teach in two departments at OCAD. I teach in the graphic design department and I teach in the Indigenous Visual Culture program. But also outside of OCAD, I do a lot of public speaking. I got graphic design clients. So in and out of the classroom, definitely keep busy.
Great. Awesome. Question two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
Ooh, I would say a key piece of knowledge that makes me different is as a graphic designer and as a design advocate and a student advocate, I specifically work with the Indigenous demographic, and I feel like that's pretty unique amongst others in community. I feel like that's pretty unique amongst others in my community.
Great. And just a note for the audience, if you guys are interested in more OCAD related episodes, check out the episode with Dory Tunstall. So number three, why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
Yeah, man, so I would say, and I'm pretty confident to say this, that there's just not a lot of Indigenous people in design. And when I'm thinking about design, I'm thinking about design education. They might call themselves designers, participate in graphic design, and knowing how powerful and important graphic design or design, AKA as invention, an inventor, a designer. There's just not a lot of Native Americans, First Nations, Indigenous people from the continent North America. So I had a lot of motivation of one, how can we get more graphic designers that target Indigenous demographics? Uh, and yeah, and then I would just think too, like as an Indigenous student, like it was hard going through college, university, graduate school, and I feel like there's other Indigenous students that are in those same struggles. So I'm kind of like in two pools and means of, man, I feel like there just needs to be more support and just more role models in school and academia than as well as in design.
Great. And I'm interested to hear your response to number four, but the question is, what does your future look like?
Ooh, so my goals. So my future is I love being a professor. I still feel very new. I still feel like I have a long journey to go as a professor, as a researcher, as an educator. So I have a lot of goals and ambitions to develop myself more knowledgeable but the areas of research focus that I want to see myself in the future is really getting more graphic designers to design for Indigenous governments in the United States and Canada. So hopefully in the future, I'm in a position where I can build some curriculum. We can open up some job opportunities at a professional, at a higher level, at a government level for Indigenous people. And man, yeah, just trying to navigate through that journey is where I hope to see myself in the future. Not exhausted, not burnt out, same energy as right now. So just trying to keep the momentum high.
Great. So question five, we say is unique to this show. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
Oh man, so being Indigenous, like it would not make sense for me to do any of my work in a different country. So just in thinking about location and place is so important, particularly for someone like me. So if I'm from South Dakota or I'm Lakota and I'm Dakota and my tribes are from North Dakota and South Dakota, everything, my identity, my values, my knowledge is going to come from the Great Plains, from the prairie, the grasslands in South Dakota. So I think what makes me unique, particularly to other folks that might participate in this podcast, is when we're talking about place, when we're talking about location, as an Indigenous person, man, that's the root or like that's the focal point of everything for me. So I always say, and I remind myself in my head all the time is, it wouldn't make sense for me to be doing this work anywhere else outside the United States. And it just blows my mind that the competency level of Indigenous culture in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, like people just don't grasp that same relationship amongst place and land and location. So yeah, I would just say when it comes to location, like that's my starting point, hands down.
Great. And six, if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
Um, man. So advice I would give to my younger self would be, um, man, confidence. Keep your confidence up in the means of, how would you say, voice. So I'm finding myself in a position of utilizing voice. And what I mean voice, I mean me as someone in a classroom speaking and transferring knowledge to my students, or as a public speaker, making sure that the knowledge that I'm transferring from I guess my research, my mind into to simplify it into a larger audience. It takes a lot of confidence. It takes a lot of people acknowledging your voice. So I would just tell myself, man, continue to keep confidence up, uh, and thinking about your communication, why you are an educator, everything that you're doing, Sadie, is important. Keep doing it. Just in the means of, again, as a traveler, as a designer, I'm learning that a lot of folks aren't super knowledgeable in maybe the work that you do, but just know that you're needed. So that's what I tell my younger self.
Great. And seven, what's a day in your life like?
A day in the life of Sadie. So I would say I teach morning classes. So my classes, I teach design process 1, design process 2. Currently, those classes are 8:30 in the morning. So your girl has to get up at least a little bit before 6. Gotta get the puffy eyes away. Gotta look presentable in the classroom. I got a Starbucks app, so I'll go get a Starbucks on my way to class. I'll be on campus and classroom and in my office. From the first half of the day, I'll take a lunch break. I'll come back to my work studio. Then I'll focus on my graphic design clients. Usually I try to get a walk in because I'm in downtown Toronto, beautiful city, never get tired of exploring. So I usually get a walk in. I'll cook myself a dinner. Um, yeah, and then I usually try to follow a show or maybe binge something on Netflix, go to sleep, start up, and do it all over again.
Sweet. And eight is around lifelong learning. It's a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
Lifelong learning, or say that one more time, Tom.
Yeah, lifelong learning is a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
Yeah, I would probably say the first thing I think about just in lifelong learning, and I think about what my grandmother, my mom's mom told me. She said, to make life fruitful, like try to learn something new every single day. Learn something new. That could be something as simple as, just meeting a new person or just having some type of interest or keeping the curiosity alive. So I feel like in thinking about that lifelong learning, to continue to be curious, to be optimistic, to be open-minded, to see more of the beauty in life and means of, again, love meeting new people, love traveling the world. Again, not afraid to try new things like new foods or experience new music. I feel like if you kind of keep that positive notion, optimism alive, particularly around the tough times, I feel like that could lead to lifelong learning and then also just overall well-being. So I think that goes hand in hand. Continue to learn something new every day, and then to continue to keep my interest, curiosity, respect open when wanting to explore outside of my bubble, I would say.
Great. And nine is about tools. What tools do you use? Are you digital and analog?
Oh man, I'm digital. I hate to admit that it's hard for me to do analog stuff. So it means of I get really jealous of people who can work with stuff with their hands. So for me, it's a little bit more challenging to work with pottery, to work with an instrument. So I feel like I'm in a more comfortable space when I'm working behind a computer for sure. Like my drawing skills aren't up to par. So I would definitely say in a digital space too.
Great. And halfway number 10, how do you deal with work-life balance?
Hold on one sec, Tom. I'll answer this in a second. Also, I'm hearing like a street cleaner outside. Let me know on the recording after if that picks up too much background noise here in a
Great.
second. But I might just to kind of restart on this recording. Can you say that question one more time?
Sure. Number 10, the halfway point. How do you deal with work-life balance?
Yeah, so good work-life balance for me is definitely having to set some boundaries. I know, for example, it's easy for me to get off balance. I might put too much on my plate, be a lot focused on work, which affects my social life or maybe affects my life outside of work. So I'm still practicing setting boundaries. One, putting a hard deadline of not answering emails at night, making sure that I put something in my calendar to treat myself after maybe a hard work week or a busy work week where I might be lacking some of the self-care aspects. But in thinking about things that I try to do is one, give myself a schedule and stick to it. Um, be mindful in my communication or practice my communication. But then also I gotta treat myself too. So it means of putting something in the calendar to look forward to. And that could be something as simple as eating buffalo wings on Wednesday for wing night, or doing something particularly where I'm not in front of a computer on all day on Saturday or something. I follow a lot of sports, so I feel like kind of being in a routine or following a sports team is helps add to that balance or helps add to setting boundaries. But man, boundaries, I gotta set them. I'm guilty at letting work overload my personal life and my social life. But again, practicing and definitely, yeah, definitely. I would probably say I'm not the expert in balancing life and work, but doing my best to make sure that I'm thinking about myself too.
Great. And if you weren't doing what you do now, what would you be doing?
Oh man. I feel like I say this at all these questions, but in thinking about if I wasn't doing what I'm doing now, I feel like I might be in two different areas. I remember being in high school and I was making a decision where if I'm going to keep up with athletics or sports, I felt like in high school that if I really pushed myself to it, I could have left there with a scholarship. I know I was a really good track runner at the time, but I didn't go in the route of sports. I went in the route of arts. And I'm thinking that if I went in the route of sports, I definitely wouldn't be in the communities that I'm in now. Other things that I always think about that I wish I would have done at a younger age, or I would be doing now, is doing maybe something like snowboarding or surfing, or I would say just keeping them in the realm of athletics. So I do come from a sports family. I would say more of my folks are more interested in sports than arts. I'm the odd one of the bunch, so I went the arts route. But I'm thinking if I wasn't a graphic designer or educator right now, I would probably be in the realms of sports, coaching, definitely in the more athletic side.
Great. And 12, what would you not like to do with your career?
Oh, what would I not like to do with my career? I would not like. Oh my goodness. I think in the career that I have, so the career that I have as an Indigenous graphic designer, I have to follow protocols. I gotta follow meaning protocols, again, as a graphic designer, not a graphic artist. I really gotta think about how selfless a profession is of design. You're always designing for the people, you're not designing for yourself. So what I would not want to do is I would not want to be in a position where I'm exploiting any of my clients, any of my target audience. I want to be in a position where I can demonstrate respectful and accurate and appropriate competency building skills when working with Indigenous identities in those aspects. So because there is such a high, I would say, a larger area to learn and to be respectful. I just want to make sure that I'm being mindful working with nations and not coming in the artist perspective that I can just make anything that I want and expect it to expect people to grasp it. So basically what I'm trying to say is when I'm working with an indigenous identity, indigenous demographic, an indigenous nation, indigenous government, like I can't fuck that identity up at all. So I have to really be mindful and just remind myself, like I hold a high standard of how I work with these demographics, and I would not want to be in a position where I fabricate any identity, or if I, am not being respectful and working with that particular target audience, that particular demographic.
Great. And do you have a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
I do. My favorite quote is from Chief Sitting Bull. It's a little snarky, but because of the snarkiness, I really like it. But the quote from Chief Sitting Bull is, to give a little bit of context, the US government was pushing indigenous people, and this is like in the 1800s, was pushing indigenous people into reservations, and they were expecting those in the reservations of South Dakota to farm. But you're telling a nomadic person, a nomadic tribal member, that now they have to farm. So the quote is Sitting Bull, he's talking to a US government official, and he says, if you want to plant corn, make the grasshoppers plant corn. They're the ones that eat it. But it's a snarkiness, meaning that, that's not my position, that's not my knowledge. Why are you asking me to plant corn when all I know is to follow the buffalo? So sometimes I'll say that quote in my head. Have the grasshoppers plant corn. They're the ones that eat it. And that's from Chief Sitting Bull.
I love it. And do you have a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
um, I would, I don't, I would, I feel like there hasn't been anything where I would never repeat in my head or never say again. For this question specifically, I would just say I don't have a quote that I don't like.
Great. And if you're choosing one word to describe yourself, what word would it be?
Charismatic.
What keeps you up at night?
Oh. Thoughts that keep me up at night is where does hate come from? Like things that oh my goodness, hold on. Well, I'm going to rephrase this one more time. Thoughts that keep me up at night is more of like, where does hate from a person come from? And I don't mean like just in a general aspect. It means of like in a position where you're exposed to news, you're exposed to confrontation, maybe in a community or a workspace, you're in conversations around colonization and means of where does harm and oppression come from, and where's the root of it, and how many thousands of years has that been running? And when I get lost in my thoughts and my wormhole, that's what it goes down to. Who was the first person to initiate that oppression or hate onto someone that has carried those same actions to this day?
Great. And 17, what's a dream you're chasing?
A dream that I'm chasing, a dream that I hope to see in my lifetime. I'm fearful that I won't see it, but I want to see Indigenous nations in the United States participating in the United Nations just like any other country in the world. So meaning that I want to see, for example, like my tribe, the Spirit Lake Dakota Nation, they're a nation, they're a government. I want to see them in the Olympics. Like, I want to, it means to visually show that someone is a government. I want to live in a time period where I can see the US government working with indigenous nations in the United States, just as they work with France or Japan or Australia, Zimbabwe, any other nation. So hopefully one day we can get a greater grasp on seeing indigenous nations as actual governments that work with the United States.
Great. And last few here, what inspires you?
What inspires me, I would say, my inspiration comes from my grandmother. I was for those who know me or those who follow my work, they know that I have a close relationship with my grandmother. My grandmother, or I carry a lot of responsibility transferring the knowledge that she shared from me. So man, in areas where my grandmother said that she wished she could have saw herself in, I'm in the position to put my place is into places where she hasn't been before. And that's, for example, holding a profession like a professor. My grandmother may have wanted to been a professor, but just through social issues and stuff, she never achieved that. So I would say my grandmother is my greatest inspiration for the work that I do.
Great. And any advice you'd like to share?
The advice I like to share, and I'm speaking particularly to designers and graphic designers, is one, do your research, be mindful of your practice. There's a lot of heart and selflessness that goes into design. So think about that, particularly when working with different demographics, target audiences, and identities that you may not be as familiar with. But just in thinking about your heart, I always say, where's your heart in this practice when it comes to graphic design or design?
Great. And number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you? What's your call to action?
Yeah, so I would say I'm most active on my Instagram. You can follow me at Sadie Red Wing, SADIE REDWING on Instagram. Also Facebook, but again, I'm an email checker. I check emails quicker than I check text messages. So anybody is always open to send me an email, sadieredwing@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining today. It's such a treat to have you on. Very much enjoyed this episode.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. And awesome questions. Very fun. Thank you so much.